All right. So once again, thank you all for being here. Today we have with us our New Borders COO, Tim Gilday,
Hello.
investigative subject matter expert, Michael Ronayne,
Good afternoon.
and our senior BITE team member, Ann Retho.
Hi.
Just to go over our agenda, Tim's going to kick us off with a presentation to provide context and background on recent developments in technology and control domains. That'll be followed by a demo of New Borders BITE platform from Ann. And from there, we're going to move on to Michael for an enforcement roundup, which will be touching base on some recent enforcement actions of note. And from there, we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So as I mentioned before, please feel free to post any questions in the chat. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tim.
Thank you, Eric. Hello, everyone. I am a co-founder of New Borders. We are a data analytics company. Many of our team members have come out of Department of Homeland Security. We worked in the IT and in the enforcement areas. We focus on trade, including strategic trade controls, which we're going to touch on in a bit, and customs fraud and other wildlife trafficking areas, any cross-border enforcement programs. What we do is use large-scale data sets to go in and help government agencies and private sector to provide them risk management tools. Today, we're going to talk about a somewhat different topic, although it falls under strategic trade controls. And that concerns technology transfer controls and how data analytics can mitigate the risk for government agencies and the private sector as well. Some of our participants today may have very deep knowledge about strategic trade controls. Some may be new to it. And so I just want to provide a brief background on how strategic trade control regimes work and what the U.S. role is in that export control regime. So as a member of several strategic trade control regimes, mainly the Wasson Arrangement that pertains to military equipment, the Australia Group relates to chemical and biological weapons development. The Missile Technology Control Regime is for launch vehicles, and the Nuclear Suppliers Group for nuclear enrichment. Those are four very important multilateral regimes that the U.S. has been a member of for quite some time. And it requires member states to implement robust domestic national regulations and statutes to make sure there is not a illicit transfer of these goods and technologies. So in the US, our system focuses on two main categories. One are military commodities and technology, which are covered by the Arms Export Control Act. And the regulations are the International Traffic in Arms Regulations. And they've been in existence since at least World War II. So we control the import and export of military equipment, from conventional weapons, small arms and light weapons, right up to advanced missiles. There are 21 categories, and the ITAR regulations cover both the commodities and the technology. In parallel to that, we have, for dual-use items, the U.S. government implements the Export Administration Regulations. Dual use, meaning it could have a commercial application. Maybe it's used in the pharmaceutical industry, or it could be used in military development, for instance, uranium enrichment. And as an example, we would provide the transducer, right? Transducer is just a small device that measures pressure, but it's very important in uranium enrichment. The centrifuges that you'll often see on in the news relating to Iran, the Cascades, where they're developing weapons grade uranium. Well, those same transducers might be used in a pharmaceutical. That's a good example of a dual use item. And the technology for those dual use items are also controlled by the Export Administration regs. And that's been the US export control regime for quite some time. And again, that's our response to those multilateral regimes that I just named at the beginning. Recently, there's been a change in the export control systems in the United States. And with the passage of the export with the ECRA, we see emerging and foundational technologies have been added to the list of controlled technologies. So you may see a few different definitions. It might be, as Commerce defines it, emerging and foundational technologies. The White House calls them critical and emerging technologies. And the industry in general refer to it as Section 1758. Those are just foundational technologies that relate to our national security. So in addition to dual-use technology, the US government has expanded this program now to control any emerging technologies, foundational technologies associated with our national security. And you can imagine this is a very difficult process, and it has been for the US government, to create a regime, a control regime for any type of enforcement domain. It could be drugs, it could be wildlife trafficking, it could be money laundering. Requires a lot of work on behalf of the government agencies, the private sector, to come together and agree upon a policy. And that's the process they're going through right now. In addition, they have to implement those policies. So they have to get all the stakeholders from the Department of Justice, the enforcement agencies, our critical trading partners from the Five Eyes, and they have to agree to an effective system of control. And this problem for technology controls is compounded by the fact that technologies themselves are intangible. So it's very difficult for them to define what is controlled, also how to license it and how to track it. So this is what the US government's been up against since probably 2019. And with these challenges in mind, our team took a look at open source data sets just to see what we could scope out as far as control technologies and how we can identify them. Where are they being collected? What data sets? And today we selected 3 data sets. Our manifest data, which has international trade transactions numbering over 700 million transactions. We looked at patent data, US patent data, which has 10 million transactions. And we finally looked at denied parties, which contains 40,000 records. We brought all of these large-scale data sets into the Byte platform. It's a big data platform. It allows our analysts like Anne and other team members to rapidly interrogate the data and look for suspicious transactions, anomalies in the trade data, and identify high-risk transactions that the US government and private sector companies would have an interest in. Essentially, what we do is integrate the 3 data sets, and you can see the challenges that would have when you are up to 1 billion records, approaching 1 billion records. How do you manage all that data? Well, what we do is integrate the 3 data sets using fuzzy matching, entity resolution tools to identify commonalities across the different elements in each data set. And our focus on this use case that we're going to show you today was to look at a large data set for intellectual property. That would be the patent data. Another data set to help us scope out the supply chain for control technologies associated with control technologies. That would be the manifest data. And finally, we want to identify activities of malign state actors within those data sets, mainly Russia and China. And what we're going to do today is show you a use case where we looked at a company from the People's Republic of China that checked all 3 boxes. And with that, Without further ado, I'll let Ann walk us through the use case.
Thanks, Tim. So like Tim said, I will walk through the use case and also do a demo of the Byte platform at the same time. So Byte is, as Tim said, the business intelligence for trade enforcement platform. So Byte is a cost-effective tool for trade and transaction compliance. So as you just heard, trade and financial compliance is complicated, complex, and Mike's going to get into a little bit more on the enforcement side and why we need to be paying attention to this. But adhering and going along with all of those regimes, as Tim just went through, can be timely and time-consuming and costly. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen to start the demo. All right. So logging in here. Okay, so Byte, through Byte, we're able to help customers mitigate their trade risk. So checking shipments and transactions for customers or commodities that are sanctioned or watch listed. So this is creates an efficiency. So as you can see here, we have a number of different modules: the watch list, Byte trade protection. So I'm going to go through each one of those and go through kind of how they help make your risk management more efficient. So as Tim said, we identified Hikvision across the 3 data sets that he addressed. So Hikvision is a large multinational company. They're the world's largest video surveillance manufacturer. And so we're going to start here with the Byte trade protection module. So this module allows you to navigate across multiple regimes and multiple agencies. It's a differentiator for Byte because it is focused on commodities rather than entities. So you can search HS codes, you can find the commodity or the HS code associated with a certain commodity. So if we were to use camera as an example, I can easily search and find the HS code associated with the camera and then dig a little bit deeper into those. I can also start to look at the regimes and controls associated with cameras. So as Tim said, there are different export controls. So if I search camera and refresh, then I can start to see different agencies that may have licensing requirements on cameras. And then lastly, within the trade protection module is where we have the patent data. So in the patent data, you can search by commodity, but you can also search by entity. So I'm going to search Hikvision here as they were the focus of this use case. And we can start to explore the 23 patents that Hikvision holds with the US Patent Office. And within each one, we can open up the record and start to see the information within the patent application or the patent itself. So this is an abstract. It goes through who the applicant is and the date that it was filed and everyone associated with it. So we can start to explore the type of patents that entities hold. And what we found was that through open source research, we found that Hikvision has been accused of enabling human rights abuses by supplying the Chinese government with cameras used in the repression of certain populations within China. So we can see here that they have a number of different types of cameras or target recognition methods. So we can see the patents that they hold that are connected to the human rights abuses. We can also then head to the Byte watch list. So this watch list contains numerous international watch lists and allows users to search against 40,000 watch listed entities. You can quickly search names or countries of origin to determine if entities are on global watch lists. So following along with the same use case here, we can search for Hikvision and start to see the various listings and where they are listed by the US government. So they're listed both by OFAC and BIS, and they're on, you can open up the record the same as in the patent data, start to see all the information, the Federal Register, where they were listed, get more information on why they were listed, and start to explore why they are listed on a watch list. And again, this creates great efficiency because you don't have to jump from list to list to list. You can just come to the watch list and search Hikvision. And we have a number of agencies. So these are not only US based, we have a list from Australia, Canada, EU, global lists in the UK. And within each one, you can select the specific government agency that you're looking for, and also then down to the list name. So you can filter your results depending on what you're looking for, and help you narrow down the exact listing that you're looking for. So the next module here is the byte list. So this is a searchable list. It's a collection of entities that the byte team has identified across the millions of trade records that Tim was just mentioning. So this is encompassing people, organizations associated with high-risk trade. It provides companies with enhanced screening for illicit trade networks. So the byte list is primarily composed of entities that are not listed elsewhere. So these are second and third tier entities. We did list Hikvision here, even though they're listed on other lists, because of the amount of data that we found tying them to the patent data and their records in the international trade data. So on each byte list listing, you can open and see the various information, and you can actually access our investigative notes that we have put in as to why we chose to list them on the byte list. As we continue our investigation of Hikvision, we would add additional entities onto this list that would also then return when searching Hikvision. So this is an additional layer of risk management for organizations who want to ensure that their supply chains are not involved in any illicit trade. Within the byte list, we have a number of investigative domains. So there's forced labor, illegal wildlife trafficking, oligarchs, strategic trade control, and also anti-money laundering. So again, you can filter within the results. If you are looking at forced labor and you were looking for entities within China associated with forced labor, you can search, we'll do India there. So that is the byte list. And in addition to these 3 searchable lists that allow for greater efficiency, you can then store all of your findings in the Byte Analytics Vault. So as you can see here, we have a number of cases saved, including Hikvision. So I saved our results and our findings here by uploading a document. You can include additional comments down at the bottom, and you can share with your team members as well. So this allows you to store all the results of your work and have a traceable audit trail that you can then use to prove that you did your due diligence in compliance. Within the app, we also have the ability to do user management and team management. So you can set up teams for your organization and manage your users right here in the app. There's also a training module, so you can upload trainings. We have a few that are pre-populated in the app that you're able to watch and learn more about the Byte platform and how to better navigate it to make your work more efficient. And then coming soon, we have the Byte score, which is a module that quantifies risk for each of your trade transactions. It leverages all of the combined Byte resources, including New Borders enforcement domain expertise, commodity lists, the watch list, the Byte list, and Byte trade protection. This allows users to receive an automated calculation of the risk associated with any given transaction. Also, all of this is soon going to be available via API. So you can connect to our Byte microservices platform, keep your data within your system, but run it against each of these lists, and it will return a result, if it's appearing on one of these lists. So again, just increasing the efficiency and the ease of use. This platform is a lot of it is free. So you can just sign up and head over and sign up now. You can access the watch list in the Byte Analytics Vault for free. And then the other modules are priced very cost effectively. So we have very transparent pricing. You can head to our website and check out all the pricing on our website. But I hope that you're able to see how the example that Tim set up, Hikvision, we could find in our trade protection module on the watch list. We then list them on the Byte list and can store it in the Byte Analytics Vault. So by bringing this all together into one system, we have an easy way to track our due diligence and trade compliance management. So with that, I will hand it off to Eric to take us to the next session.
Thanks, Anne. Really appreciate it. Now we're going to move to Michael for an enforcement roundup.
Thanks, Eric. Good afternoon. I'm Mike Ronayne. Before joining New Borders as a subject matter expert in investigations, I was a special agent with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the United States Customs Service for over 20 years. To wrap up the call today, I'm going to provide a little bit of enforcement information, some recent news from the enforcement community. And I'm going to start with the last two OFAC civil penalties that were announced on May 17th. Murad, a California-based company, agreed to pay over a $3 million fine for a violation associated with cosmetics exports to Iran. Over an 8-year period, Murad conducted 62 exports valued at over $11 million in violation of the OFAC sanctions. And the OFAC sanctions, I should mention, are in place to achieve foreign policy and national security objectives. On June 20th, OFAC announced that Swedbank Latvia, which is a subsidiary of Swedbank in Stockholm, Sweden, agreed to pay a penalty of over $3 million for violations of OFAC sanctions involving Crimea. An individual utilizing the Swedbank Latvia e-banking platform sent payments to Crimea through U.S. corresponding banks. And this essentially amounts to the export of financial services from the U.S., which would be in violation of U.S. exports and OFAC sanctions. Secondly, on June 9th, an industry advisory was published jointly by the Department of Justice, the Department of Commerce, Department of State, and OFAC, titled Guidance to Industry, on Iran's UAV-related activity. And it discusses Iran's proliferation recently of unmanned aerial vehicles. The advisory language, in part, read: the intent of the advisory was to highlight effective due diligence policies, compliance structures, and internal controls relevant specifically to the Iran UAV program. And as a company, it's critical that you're aware of your responsibilities in this arena and ensuring that U.S. commodities and U.S. produced goods do not find their way into Iranian UAVs or the production of an Iranian UAV. The key points from the advisory, really to be aware of, that the U.S. has recently identified hundreds of transfers of UAVs to Russia since last August, and Russia is utilizing these UAVs
in their war against Ukraine. The advisory further states that Iran has even offered Russia production technology and facilities for UAVs. Secondly, Iran cannot produce many of the necessary commodities themselves. So this offers a good opportunity for procurement from the US and procurement agents to identify commodities manufactured in the US that they cannot produce themselves. And then finally, Iran often uses commercial grade components in the production of their weapons systems. So there's many commodities that may be seemingly innocuous in nature. However, they may be a critical component in a more complex, broader weapons system. The advisory goes on to list numerous HS codes in chapters 84 and 85 to include gyroscopes, flight computers, capacitors, and navigational sensors. And all businesses should really be aware of their be diligent when looking at their export activity. Some of the red flags that the advisory stated are also the same red flags that, as an agent, I went and spoke with industry regularly with regard to export control and compliance. Some of these are not willing to discuss the end use of the products. That would obviously be a red flag. Declining training or maintenance offers, companies with little or no web presence, an unusual payment routing, or finally, shipments that are sent to destinations that are well known for transshipment, such as Hong Kong, the UAE, or Singapore. And then just lastly, in terms of the advisory, the penalties for export violations can reach up to 20 years of imprisonment and up to $1 million in fines. But in addition to that, there are also, sort of as we discussed with the OFAC sanctions, some administrative penalties that can be very costly for a business. Finally, the U.S. Department of Justice announced in April the sentencing of Tao Zhang, the owner of Broadtech Systems, Inc., for illegally exporting chemicals used in chip manufacturing process from a Rhode Island company, or almost causing the export of the Rhode Island company to export these two chemicals used in this process to China. And the Chinese consignee was also sanctioned by the U.S., therefore prohibited from receiving any U.S. commodities. Now, the case started in 2018 when U.S. Customs and Border Protection, who are the uniformed officers at the border, identified the shipment as suspicious, stopped it, and turned it back around to the Rhode Island company and sent it back. Subsequently, Zhang, the defendant in this case, contacted the Rhode Island company and asked to purchase more of the same chemical, but send it to a different Chinese company. Now, the company immediately, back to sort of the red flags that we just discussed, noticed that this was unusual behavior. One, because they had not previously dealt with this company in the past. Two, the quantity of chemical was unusual for what they typically see in this business. And then three, and quite obviously, was the timing of the request from the same customer for the same product immediately after the first one was turned around and returned to them. So great job by this company notifying enforcement authorities, which ultimately led to a guilty plea. Zhang pled guilty to charges for the Export Control Act, and as well as money laundering, conspiracy, and specifically false and misleading documentation to the U.S. government and shipping companies. Now, Zhang was sentenced to federal probation, a fine of 100 hours community service, and the company, Broadtech, was placed on 1 year of federal probation in order to pay a fine of $120,000. But again, a great case to highlight, showing that industry being aware of their product, being aware of their customers, notifying the enforcement community, and leading to an enforcement operation. I'll send it back to Eric.
Thanks, Mike. Really appreciate it. And thanks again to Tim and Ann for your presentations. If there are any questions from anyone on the call, please feel free to throw them in the chat before we wrap up. If you're interested in learning more about the Byte platform, feel free to visit our website at bytedata.io. That's bitedata.io. I'll throw that link in the chat one more time. We do plan on hosting these webinars monthly, so please follow New Borders on LinkedIn to stay up to date on our upcoming events and just all of the other resources that we're providing there. I'm not seeing any additional questions, so once again, thank you to everyone for joining us today, and we'll see you again next month.
Thank you.